Hi everybody, welcome back. We're up to part 14 now of the Trumpeter 200 scale Bismarck build, and this week I'm going to carry on where I left off last week. I built the two Arado aircraft last week, one with the wings spread ready to be launched from the catapult and one to be stored in the hangar, and this time I'm doing the work around the hangar area and fitting the catapults that I built a couple of episodes ago as well. So everything to prepare for the finishing off of the central part of the ship. So I'll show you the work that I've done this week to get this central area of the ship more or less finished. So I'm going to make a start this week fitting the superstructure decks. This is the forward superstructure deck, which is yet to be glued into place. I've fitted the aft superstructure deck here, which wasn't as straightforward as it should have been, and I'll just go through what I had to do with that, and probably I'll have to do the same with the forward superstructure deck as well to make the fitting of that a little bit easier. I've also got to fit this large piece of photo etch, which is a bit more detailed deck around the hangars next to the funnels here. That's already been pre-painted, and I'm going to use some epoxy to glue that in place before I actually fit this deck down. Whilst I've got the epoxy mixed up, I'll also glue the catapult section. This is the lower part of the catapult, the bottom rails for the catapult, and I'll fix that in place with the epoxy. The reason I'm using epoxy is that these are large pieces of brass, and if you don't use something like an epoxy, they will pop off with changes in temperature, and super glue just won't hold that at all. So epoxy is the way to go for a large piece of brass like this and this long piece here. So that's the first thing I'll do. I'll get the epoxy mixed up and we'll get these brass parts fitted. So this is a two-part epoxy that I use, and I like to use the rapid variety. There's a standard set variety as well in the UK at least, but I prefer the rapid set. I say prefer, I don't really like using epoxy at all. It's I find it really messy stuff, but as I say, it's good for parts like this. It's easy enough to mix. You just need to make sure that this two parts mixed thoroughly, and use it straight away. Obviously it starts to go off pretty quickly. And I don't want to put too much on this, because if it squeezes out, it'll make a real mess, and it's not easy to clean up. Once it's gone hard, it's pretty rock hard. So I just want a thin smear and stay probably 6-7 millimeters from the end, from the edges. Just taking off a little bit here. I think I've got a bit too much on. The instructions for epoxy tell us to put the glue on both parts of the join, but I don't really like to do that. It's very difficult to control. I think I mentioned a couple of episodes ago when I built the catapults that I folded this part a little bit because the deck rises up towards the catapult, and it also falls away down here, so there are a couple of bends on it to make, because you don't want this springing, you don't want the part to be under pressure at all. So that's gone on alright actually. I've not got no spills or marks on there. The set time for this rapid version of epoxy is about 25-30 minutes, but I'll leave this for a good hour to set, and I just want to apply a little bit of pressure to hold it down into position. So I just use these old foam sanding sticks. So I'll leave that alone, and hopefully get a decent result with that when we take it off. So we'll leave that for half an hour, as I said. So this is the catapult bottom plate. I'll just keep my eye on that. I'm not going to try and pin it. So it's useful to just hang on to the card with the mixed up glue. You can see that this has already gone off. Can't move that stick out of the glue, which means that the glue on that deck piece that I fitted is probably already gone off. It's probably 10 minutes since I mixed this part up. So it's just a useful thing to hold on to, just to observe what the glue's doing. Okay, the brass here is set really well with the epoxy, so is the catapult base. And now I want to fit this forward superstructure deck onto the ship. The problem that I encountered with the back, and I've got it again here on this forward part, is that the deck on the Trumpeter kit, the plastic deck, is actually warped a little bit, so it dips down here in this semicircular enclosure, and it does to a smaller extent here on this mounting here. So what I did on the after part was to actually prop the deck up a little bit. So I put some spacers in using some really thick sprue, and that just lifted this section of the deck up. And it meant that the superstructure deck here, the bulkhead sat nice and flush onto the deck. So I'm going to have to do the same thing with this. It's too much to rely on glue just to hold that part in place. There's too much spring in it, so I'm not going to take that chance. And we'll get that beefed up a little bit so that this sits nice and flat. So I used some pieces like this. This is very thick sprue, and it's actually from the supports that came across the opening in the Trumpeter deck. But they're coming in useful now because I can use these to really add some strength to the deck and lift it up. The trick is to trim these to the correct length so that it's just enough. You don't want it coming too far up, because that just means that the superstructure part here will just rock around. So it's got to be pretty precise. It's actually worse on the port side than the starboard, probably by something like 5mm. So I need to lift this section of the deck up by about 5mm. So I'm just gradually going to trim this section of sprue down until it acts as that prop, if you like. And then we'll just check the fit again. And this is really just trial and error. You've just got to work at it until you get the sort of height that you need. Okay, so we're good on the port side. I'll just have to do the same on the starboard here. Okay, so with those two props in position, I've got a nice fit of this bulkhead on this forward superstructure onto this deck. So knowing that now, I'm going to secure those props into position. For that, I'm just going to use some extra thin CA. And now I can glue the deck. The way that I did this on the aft side was to just apply the cement onto the inside face of the bulkhead, because we've got this lip going all the way around, and that glue surface will join with this ridge. And if you don't put too much glue on, you're not going to get it down, running down onto the deck. So let's get in and get this glued up. Okay, so you can see I've got clamps all over the place on this, but hopefully that should hold things down. Okay, just leave that to set. I'm going to leave it for a full day because there's quite a lot of surface area there. I've just checked round the outside, there's no spots of glue running out, so that's all good. So hopefully that'll give us a decent base for carrying on with the work. So what I can do whilst I'm waiting for this to dry is to fit the catapults. These were the parts that I built a couple of weeks ago now. And the one here on the port side is the one that's going to be in the extended position. So this will have one of the aircraft that I built last week on it, ready for flight. Okay, so that's the deployed catapult. So this second one on the starboard side is going to be in the stowed position. So this will go all the way into the centre of the ship. So to be able to fit this in the retracted state, you have to cut the piston off from the underside that goes into this barrel here, and that enables the structure to go all the way in there like that. These plates fitted to the over the channel between the two decks. Obviously that was to be able to haul equipment and the aeroplanes themselves onto the catapult. Now Pontos provide this in one piece, and they provide the parts such that you could have both catapults stowed away, but because I've got this one extended, the plating would have been removed at that point, and I've just shortened it at this end. So that's ready to go as well. I'm not going to fit it just yet. I've got to do the rails for the aircraft next. So we'll take a look at what that's going to involve. So these are marked here on the Pontos deck. You can see the position of the rails. These are basically just tracks that led out of the hangars and up onto the catapult so that the aircraft could be hauled into position. The aircraft themselves were on trolleys, wheeled trolleys, which would run in those rails. So I'm going to be building those two bits next. They were removable, so I'm not going to be positioning them on this side. The hangar where I'm going to have the stowed aircraft is here on the port side, so I'll just fit the rails to this side of the deck. So the ship's safely tucked away in a corner of the shed. This is the fret for the rails, which are these. Now Pontos provide enough to furnish all 4 hangars, but we don't need that. I'm only doing one, and they were removable, as I said, so you don't need to use all of these. So we'll get them cut off. I'm also going to build the trolleys for the Arado aircraft as well, and at that stage I'll be able to test fit whether the stowed Arado will actually fit on the rails in the hangar. Okay, so these are the rails, and this frame fits on top of the rail like that, and I assume that the aircraft trolley sits on top of that as well. So I'll just put those to one side. What I want to do now is build the aircraft trolley so that I can test that these will all fit together and go inside the hangar. I've already done one, and this is actually fitted to a frame which sits on the rails like that. The next one that I'm going to build will just be the plain trolley, and will fit directly onto the extended catapult. So I've built this as usual to work out the best way to put them together. The Pontos instructions let us down again. They're very difficult to follow, but eventually I worked it out. But I didn't follow the procedure in the Pontos instructions, and I'll explain why when we come to put the next one together. So we'll get the parts off first of all. The first thing I'm going to do is build the base plate, I suppose you would call it. So this is just laminated in 3 parts. We've got some bends for the brackets at the underside. So we just double up the 2 parts with the brackets, just back onto each other, and then the plain piece drops inside like that. The front is the section with the tiny little slot in it here. It's very difficult to see. So I'm going to pin all that together with the pliers and apply some extra thin just onto the back, just to tack it together, and I'll explain why in a moment. Next we've got some turned brass. So basically the rods and posts that hold all this together. 2 long and 2 short. And we've got some more photo etch, so a frame. So the brackets at the top there just fold over through 180 degrees. I'm not going to put any glue on that because the pins that are formed here actually fit into holes in these rods, and that holds them all together. Now Pontos suggests that we fit these rods onto this very fragile piece of photo etch, but I found building the first one that this photo etch isn't strong enough. It doesn't work, it doesn't last the various manoeuvring that you've got to do to get everything to fit together. So I found the best thing to do was to fit the posts into the base plate. And this is the reason why I didn't apply any glue to this front end, because it can block the holes up. So a nice clear hole there. Those posts go in all the way through all three pieces of photo etch, all three laminations. And once they're in position, now I can put some extra thin on there, and it'll secure both the posts and the laminations, get the posts levelled up, straightened up. So that's what the assembly should look like at this stage. This is another bracket which fits onto the base plate. That goes in the middle. Now that that's all set, these posts are quite solid. So now I can fit this piece of photo etch. Remember, we've not put any glue on these yet. And we've got two pins, one for the short post that we've got in position and one for the long brace that runs to the back of the trolley. So I'll start off with the short post. They're both in. You can see we've got this angle brace here at the front now. Now, one problem I had with the first one, and it's the same with this, is that these little braces at the front just don't fit. They're too long and I just couldn't get them to go into the correct position. So I've scrapped those, and what I did was I've used some of these spare parts here, part 870, which you don't need if you build it the way I build it. And I've just used that to make some replacement braces, and you can cut these to the correct length. So I don't know what I've done wrong. I must have done something wrong in the location of this front piece, but I can't get it to fit at all, so we'll use this instead. So it's the same gauge as the original part. So we've got the bracket at the bottom, and just adjust the length to fit. So that's my only way of doing it, really, just some replacement braces. This front end of the trolley is actually hidden all the way underneath the aircraft, so don't worry too much about it. Next we can put these long posts in. So they're the back braces, if you like. Again, they just push in and just clip into a couple of little holes at the back of the trolley. Just a spot of glue at the back just to hold them in place. That's the trolley all finished. I'll get that painted, and then that can go onto the catapult with the Arado. Okay, Okay, back to the ship now, and this superstructure that I fitted yesterday should have had a chance to dry. I hope it has stayed in place. So I'll get rid of these clamps now. Okay, so that's all good. That's nice and solid. Those props that I put in have done the job, so that's all good to go. Now I'm going to add the hanger rails into this position. The Stodorado will be going in this hanger here, so I'm fitting the rails onto this section of deck. Okay, let's get some of these parts fitted. I'll start with the hanger rails. So the trolley for the Stodorado will just sit on there. So I'm going to glue this trolley to the Arado with the folded wings, and I'll just check fit it then into the hanger space and put the superstructure over the top of it just to make sure it's all going to fit. So you can see the trolley sits quite a long way back on the airframe. The forward pillars just behind the rear struts on the floats, and the central brace just attaches to the underside of the rear fuselage. And then the aircraft just sits on the rails like that. So I just want to make sure that the hanger structure will fit over the top without any interference. So the aircraft's going to have to be in a position something like that. There's something stopping it from going any further back into the hangar, but I'm not going to mess around with it, so I'll just position the aircraft in that sort of way and it should look okay. So just move that out of the way for the moment, and I'll do the various hatches and covers that we need to be fitting in this area as well. So the first thing I want to do is fit this main set of gratings or covers on the catapult. I'm getting all the last parts ready for painting in this catapult area, and this is a platform which runs around the edge of the catapult, both sides. I'm going to make both of them, and we just have to fit some rails to these. I say just. They're pretty fragile structures, as you can see. This central part here just sits underneath the catapult, and these walkways run around the outside. We've got some railings to fit and some photo etch platforms, which are these. Do the railings. There are a few bends on these just to follow the shape of the platform, so I'll just eyeball the bends that need to be made. Once you're happy with the shape that you've got, the railing can be fitted. We have these supports which come up, and we're going to fit those onto the stanchions. Just bend them back, and we need to attach each of those individually. And these are quite useful actually, because they do the same thing as they did in real life. They add some support to the railings. And the last one, the stays here at the front actually drop down onto the deck, but I'm not going to fuss too much over those at the minute. I'll adjust the position of them when we come to fit this platform onto the model. In the meantime, I'll prime that, get it painted. Just fitting the hatches next to the catapult. So on the stowed catapult here, we've got the hatches closed, and on this side I've opened them up. Okay, the last thing I've got to do is to fit the port gantry, which goes on this side. I've already fitted the starboard one, and it's not the easiest thing to fit, so I'm going to have to move the camera, bring it in, and I'll show you how that goes on. So a test fit just to make sure everything's going to go. There isn't much holding this on really, there's just a few tabs on the framework. Sorry about my noisy neighbours. It must be feeding time, I think. Goodness me. We will get a little bit more strength when we fold the legs down at the front. They go down onto the deck. Not the time to have a sneeze. Just need to touch those pads up with some of our sky grey. Okay, so that's it for another week on the Bismarck build. I've got done what I set out to do really, which was to get the catapult installed, ready for the installation of the aircraft. I wanted to check the fit of the Arado in the hangar and get the rails in. But actually, as I've been looking at the model since I finished off the catapult work, I'm thinking again about the location of this stowed aircraft. It's a little bit close to the one on the catapult. And what I might do, I think, is reposition it over in the starboard hangar to the side of the funnel, which is over this side. So it just creates a little bit of distance. It's looking a bit crowded in this area at the moment. I just want to balance it out a little bit more. The work that I've done on the rails in this hangar isn't wasted though, because it gives the appearance that the aircraft on the catapult is the one that's come from this hangar. So I haven't wasted the work that I've done. But all the work that I have done this week just enables me to move on in the next couple of episodes onto the next level of superstructure. So I'll start next week with this after superstructure section, which again involves quite a bit of Pontos photo etch. All the bulkheads on the Bismarck are crammed with photo etch detail, which takes quite a bit of time. So I'm thinking that this next section here will take a full episode to get ready. So that'll be part 15, which will be as usual next Friday at 8 o'clock. So we're back onto the Bismarck as the Friday night slot after finishing the Mosquito off. One other thing that I'm working on at the moment is the 1/48 scale Tamiya P51, which is nearing completion now. So I'm hoping to get the short video on that one, a quick build video, done over the next few days and published over the next week or so. But if you're following the Bismarck build, as I said, the next one on Friday 8 o'clock, so I hope to see you for that. In the meantime, everybody, look after yourselves, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.